so that I know there was a few people who wanted to attend but weren't able to make it. So we will distribute the recording afterwards. So thanks, as I said, for joining us. We're delighted to have be able to hold another webinar and hopefully be able to share some useful information with you. I'll just introduce our panel and say thanks to them all for joining us. So we have Ger O'Leary, who is the principal of Selbridge Community School in Selbridge, County Kildare. Erica Mclaughlin. Erica is a teacher in Our Lady's Hospital School, which is based in Crumlin. So I'm sure some of you will be very familiar with that. Lucy Cronly, thanks again. Lucy was a wealth of information on our last webinar. Lucy's son, Owen, is a childhood cancer survivor, and Owen was in treatment across both primary and secondary schools. So Lucy has a lot of experience in this area and a lot of experience to share with us. Mary Claire Rennick is one of the directors of Childhood Cancer Foundation Ireland, and will also talk about her experiences from her daughter Alice, who's also a childhood cancer survivor. Laura Cullinan, again, fellow director of Childhood Cancer Foundation Ireland, and Laura will keep an eye on the chat and any comments coming in. I forgot to introduce myself. Fionnuala Murphy, I've been a director of Childhood Cancer Foundation Ireland for about 2.5 years. So I don't have near as much experience as Mary Claire and Laura. They are the experts in this area. And finally, Evelyn Griffith. Evelyn, thanks so much for joining us. Evelyn is the manager of Canteen Ireland. And if you're not aware of Canteen and the services they offer, Evelyn will give us a brief presentation at the end, because it's an organisation, if your child or young person is not of that age group yet, it's an organisation that you will want to be aware of for when they are. So we will kick off with some presentations. We'll allow time for questions at the end of each, but you can also pop questions or comments in the chat, and Laura will keep an eye on that, or you can use the raise hand function, which is at the end of your screen there. Yeah, pop your hand up. We'll allow time for questions at the end of each presentation, and also time at the end, maybe after I stop recording, if anyone would prefer to ask a question without it being recorded. So I think we'll kick off. Ger, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, well, indeed. Thanks very much, Fionnuala. I'll just put my slides up here to start off. Can everybody see those? They're okay? Yeah, okay. So thanks very much for the invitation to speak this evening. I'm delighted to be able to meet you all virtually, despite the fact that we can be face-to-face. Hopefully we will be able to share the information that we have here this evening with you. And again, I appreciate that it might be possible to cover every single question that people might have, and we were just talking about it there beforehand. If anything comes up to mind at any stage for anybody, feel free to follow up afterwards with Fionnuala, and she'll touch base with me, and I'll come back to yourselves in relation to that then. The overview that I'm going to try and share with you is really broad in terms of, I suppose, the experience of being in a secondary school. And I've worked in 3 different secondary schools over the last 20 years, a VPing school, a ETB school, and now a community school. And while I can say genuinely hand on heart in relation to all those sectors, is in every school, every school will want to do its very best for every single student that comes into that school. And there are broad general principles to be applied that are constantly changing and evolving, and coupled with that, I suppose, there is the unique individual, and that's the piece that I suppose that needs to be mapped and joined together here within this. That what I can give you is the broad overview of what is available in the educational system in a mainstream secondary school, and then I suppose the real importance, the main takeaway, if I was to say anything in 5 seconds to you, is to keep talking to the school, keep linking in with the school, and then you'll get the best results for yourself, and most importantly of all, for your child. So there's 8 areas that I'll touch on briefly with you, because I'm going to try and cover all of this in 10 to 15 minutes or so, and they're set out there within all of that. And I'm going to try and cover it, I suppose, in chronological order from when a child is in 6th class right through to senior cycle and progressing past Leaving Cert, and the things to watch out for in that process, and the things to, I suppose, make sure you address in a timely fashion to get, again, the best results for your child in that process. So stepping back from all of that, the journey in secondary school really starts when a student is in 6th class. There was an Admissions Act in 2018, which really tidied everything up for all schools, that there was no such thing as having to apply when you were in 4th class or 5th class in different areas or 6th in others. And it essentially means that now in any given year, when students are in 6th class, in October of that year, from the 1st of October on, it can vary slightly from area to area, depending on the school's decision. But generally speaking, it'll be the start of October onwards that applications are made into secondary school. There'll be opportunities for open days, open evenings, and so on. And again, go to as many schools as you possibly can and seek out the one that suits your child best. And in that regard, give yourself plenty of options. The process is great in that regard because it opens everything up for everybody and has streamlined it and makes it really transparent and I suppose clear for everybody. The only piece that is maybe a slight drawback in this process now is that schools are only allowed to ask basic questions such as name, address, date of birth, and beyond that, there's very little else that schools can actually ask for when they're making, I suppose, gathering information for students coming into a school. And the gap there that we're starting to see in schools is that unless people touch base and volunteer information, it can go quite late into the transition process from primary school into secondary school. And indeed, if nobody tells the school anything in secondary school, the student can actually arrive into the school starting first year without that full knowledge of how you best support the student. And again, you don't have to, I suppose, start that process until you actually know you have your place secured, and that's absolutely fine. But as soon as you have your place secured, I would say from Christmas on in 6th year, that it's really, really important to make contact with the school as soon as possible. And I would say from there, then arrange a meeting with the principal of the school or deputy principal, and then outline and share the information with the school in order to allow time to plan for whatever the bespoke needs of the child is, and to make sure that there is the best possible outcome for the child from the outset. And any school that I've ever worked in and any school that I'm aware of would be really, really open to that and really appreciative of the opportunities that that affords in terms of forward planning, because ultimately every school wants to look after the children that are coming through the door, and particularly coming into first year, because it's a big challenge for every single child, and making sure that you make that transition as smooth as possible. And again, there is no particular template there in that regard. It's a discussion that you're having. But I would say from the earliest possible meeting you have in that regard, give the background information. And there's kind of a number of different elements of it in that regard, that where is the child in terms of needs, to look after the holistic needs of the child? Are there specifics that the child needs to get support with? Is there particular plans that need to be put in place? But also separate to going forward to actually being in the school, is there gaps in the educational experience that the child has had heretofore that need to be supported and addressed as early as possible? And again, all of that is a broad picture that allows for planning to take place there, again, at the earliest possible point. And have specific plans. If there are specific medical needs that need to be put in place, every school will have a range of different students with a whole variety of different medical needs. And again, it's about putting something in place as early as possible in that regard. I suppose when you start to move into putting that in place, then there is I think misnomers sometimes that exist in relation to special educational needs, and people often perceive special educational needs, or SEN, to be linked with a specific learning difficulty, and it doesn't have to be that at all. It can be very much linked back with a transitional piece, in terms of if there has been some reason why a child has had their educational experience heretofore, or going forward indeed as the student joins the school, if it's been impacted, then that is an additional need. And again, that term special education needs, I don't personally like it, but outside of that, that's just the term that's there. I would look at it more as an additional need, and it can be an additional need that can be relevant for a relatively short period of time, that may arise for a period of time and may balance out and may come up again at a future point. And what's really, really good about what is referred to as the general allocation model that all schools work under now is there is that freedom and flexibility for schools to address the needs of students, in terms of those with the greatest need at any particular point in time receive the greatest level of support. So up until the last couple of years, it was very much linked in the area of special educational needs, with a student having to have a diagnosed special educational need, and then there was hours allocated to a specific student for that. That's gone completely. And there is that triangle there of a continuum of support, where every student in the school fits into support for all, through to some, and then ultimately a few. And I suppose what I'm really trying to capture in all of this is that unless that information is shared, the school won't know, and won't be in a position to be able to put in the interventions and supports in the best possible means. And again, this is relatively new, and how it is actioned in schools will vary from school to school. The principle is that there is a bank of hours that are allocated to a school, and then the school is charged with the responsibility of essentially putting a plan in place to support the students, and that plan is constantly changing and evolving. And in our own case, we reevaluate it essentially every half term. So when we have, our plan was in place from Christmas to Easter at the moment, we were immediately in January looking at how are we going to move to the next phase for post-Easter to summer and so on. And when we come in after Easter now, we'll be looking immediately to how do we start in September with our provision and support. And that is like literally where it sits at this point in time, that if there are students joining us next year and first year, we're trying every which way we can to make sure we're gathering the information. But if we don't know it, it'll be too late in September, because we're already planning it now from Easter to summer. And I suppose again there, around that whole idea of the specific support in that regard, then you can have follow-up meetings then with the school, with the special educational needs coordinator in the school, or SENCO is the term that's referred to there. It may be very applicable very early on to link in with the guidance support teachers in the school, or if the school has a chaplain or whatever else in that regard, to build relationships there could be really, really useful, or a year ahead and key link persons, whatever the system in the school is, be it a class tutor or whatever else, that you know as a parent, who's my link person, and that I know I'm going to communicate that information, to make sure that we're constantly have open lines of communication open, again, to constantly ensure that you're getting the best possible results for your child, and indeed from the school's perspective to ensure that you're looking after every student properly. And then you're into conversations like, what does the school day look like? And the plan of coordinating literally the needs that are bespoke for each individual child. Is there specific needs in terms of going and coming from school, positioning of lockers, access to toilets? Is there space for medical interventions that may be needed throughout the course of the day? Or is there times where you may need to come in, or whatever else in that regard? Do you need to give consideration at particular points in time to what the timetable operates and looks like? And again, there's phrases that are often used, like a reduced timetable. And again, that's a phrase I don't like. Often, I don't think you reduce the timetable for any student. You're always maximizing it to the greatest ability of a student at any particular point in time. So is there fatigue going to be an issue? Maybe at a point in time where you're looking at what does that timetable look like in any given day? Are there periods of rest required, and so on? And all of those things can be looked at and evaluated and broken down into half-term blocks or whatever is relevant in that regard. And I suppose broader things then that you're looking at, again, digging deeper into school life. Ultimately, it's about learning, and it's about the teaching and learning in the school. And you're trying to understand what does that look like day to day. But also, if you're outside of school, if you're not able to make it into school for periods of time, are there platforms available to link in with the school through ICT and so on? And their conversations worth having. Can you ensure that the child, again, is reaching their full potential all of the time? I'm conscious of time, so I will speed up with Vanilla, sorry. Broader pieces there, again, looking at outside of the classroom, looking at co-curricular, extracurricular, is there planning required there? I know just from over 20 years of experience, this is not a space I've met many students in, but for the students I have met, it's been really important. I know concerns have arisen in relation to picking up cuts and infections and things like that have been, really important pieces in terms of sport and involvement in extracurricular clubs and so on, and making sure that there was still a plan in place, even if the extracurricular club was happening later in the evening, and if there was a cut and so on, that all of those medical pieces were looked after. And again, discussing a plan that's based around the needs and priorities for the child. And again, really briefly from there, then just things to be aware of. Are for state exams commission exams, so be it for third year and sixth year, there are applications that can be made for reasonable accommodation for exams, and they essentially happen in the year you're doing the exam. So again, they're nothing to be worried about in first, second year or whatever else, but just to be aware that's something you need to be looking at, and the school will guide you in that regard. Outside of that, if there are gaps that the school are not able to address or become wider than that, and that there's significant absences, again, an education welfare officer is available. Things can be looked at through home tuition, iSchool, and again, all of these pieces can be looked at either as temporary or long-term, and a school will look to try and help and support students in relation to all of those. And again, I know you've heard pieces on this before, but again, just moving on, I suppose, from the secondary school piece into senior cycle and beyond, and an awareness as well of the Leaving Cert Applied program, which can be a really, really good program within a school, and it's not as simple or as narrow as the Leaving Cert Established. That is the mainstream one that most students go through. It's very much the forerunner of the Leaving Cert Applied program, and that's there at the moment. That's where Leaving Cert will ultimately probably be reformed to, will probably look a lot like that. And it's again, just to be aware of possibilities that are out there and to see do they meet your needs best. And again, then just looking at the application processes that are available into the third level, that there are provisions and supports that are available going forward. I think that's me covered, Vanilla. Okay.
Thanks a million, Ger. You covered a lot there, so thank you very much. I suppose just to reiterate for anyone who's joined us since the introductions, that I will be sending out the recording and all the slides, so don't worry if you've missed some of the information. Ger, I'm just going to stop your screen share there. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Because I suppose what we wanted to do tonight was a signpost and just bring up areas for you, as for parents and families, to be thinking about. So it's not, you know, we can't give all of the information here tonight, but it's really just to plant seeds, I suppose, so that you can make sure to have those conversations. And I think, I suppose, the one thing I would take away from that, Ger, is to talk to the school, to be open. And we're going to have families in very different circumstances watching this, you know, families whose child might have finished treatment a few years ago and everything seems fine. But I suppose you just don't know what challenges secondary school might throw up. Or you'll have families a bit more like yours, Lucy, who are in treatment across primary and secondary. So obviously there's a need to talk to the school there, and then families who, children and young people who will be diagnosed when they're in secondary school. So we're trying to incorporate all of that. And I suppose you've set out really well, I think, the need to talk to the school and be open and just get those lines of communication open. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, I suppose, across all of these is everything is quite specific to different schools and different scenarios, to different children and young people. So it's only by having those conversations that you will find the best solutions. There was one question there, Ger.
Yeah, there's one for me there, yeah. So it was linked in with how do you access the education welfare officer? So you could either contact the school or else there is, if you literally just put in education welfare officers for your areas into a Google search, you'll get them. They're assigned, they essentially work through TUSLA, and they are assigned to geographical areas. So, for example, we're in North Kildare, and there is an education welfare officer that is assigned to North Kildare that works out of an ACE office. So they would be essentially geographically assigned, but it's any school will know exactly who their education welfare officer is. So whatever school you're attending, if you just contact them and ask them, they'll point you in the right direction. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, well, don't worry, you know, there'll be time to ask questions later on if something crops up for people. But in the meantime, I'll introduce you to Erica Mclaughlin. Erica, thanks a million for joining us. Erica is a teacher, as I said, in Our Lady's Hospital School in Cronly, so dealing with children and young people who are in treatment. And we're looking forward to hearing all your insights, Erica.
Thanks, Vanula. Thanks everybody for giving me the space to speak with you this evening. And just, I guess, a brief overview on myself. I'm nearly 4 years in Our Lady's Hospital School in Cronly, and I'm working on John's ward at the moment. But previous to that, you might notice by the quirky accent, I grew up in Canada, so I would have taught 4 years in grade 7 and 8 in Ontario before I emigrated, and grade 7 and 8 is the end of primary school over there. So I would have really focused on the transition to secondary there. And I very luckily got a job in a wonderful special school when I did emigrate, and I worked there for 12 years in Dublin. And again, I was a 6th class teacher for the majority of that. And there's a huge focus on the transition to secondary. From special school, it's a massive gap to go from special to mainstream. So it was, I'd like to say, an area of expertise. So I'm very fortunate to be with you this evening to hopefully share you some of my insight and my opinions on the transition. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So bear with me now while I try to do that. Go. Okay. Now, okay, hopefully everyone can see that now.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, so there's our lovely little sensory room, just to give you a little snapshot of our school. All right, so I just thought I would briefly cover some of the common challenges for most pupils when they're moving on to mainstream. And I know I will be repeating a little bit of what Ger had to say, so I apologize in advance. But just meeting new friends and peers can be a massive challenge, especially if you're not moving to a school that's in your feeder area. And that can be for everybody, getting to know new teachers, their varying teaching styles, their rules. You're going from one pupil classroom to several teachers, and we all have our own personalities and different ways of doing things, so that can be quite a challenge at the very beginning. Organizing books and lockers and timetables and schedules can be very challenging as well. Making sure you have the correct books to be brought home, and then to do your homework and to bring back to school. That can take a little bit of adjusting, at the beginning. An increase in homework demands, is another thing that, we do try to prepare in 6th class for that, but, it's not until I think you're in situ that you really understand, how to organize yourself and, get homework assignments that were given on Monday and not due till Friday, get them, done in an orderly fashion. And then something else that's actually come up with a lot of pupils, it's in feedback that I've got from them, is that they love taster subjects because they may not be aware of a few of the subjects that are offered in secondary school. So having that chance to do taster subjects before they actually have to choose, which I think usually happens around midterm in October, that is a great thing for a lot of pupils to give it a try to. So what I've noticed is there are a few additional challenges to those that are undergoing medical treatment. First of all, is that they have an awareness of the side effects of the medication that they're on, but depending on, I guess, how much information has been given to the school, maybe their teachers don't understand, what side effects they are being challenged by. So they may have a shorter attention span, and they may have, been able to sit through an entire class, before they underwent treatment, but now they're only able for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Maybe they get a lot more fatigue, more tired quicker, and they need to have rest periods. There are lots of those kinds of things can happen. And I think it's just so important. I know Jer mentioned it, to just make sure that the school does, or somebody on staff does know that those things are, that your child is experiencing those things, just so that they can support them in the best way possible for that child. There might be an inability to keep up with the amount of coursework and homework that they're being given, due to lack of energy and changes that are happening with them. They may not be able to do homework at all for a period, but I think it's just constantly being in tune with your child and, knowing what they're able to cope with. They might, be able for a lot more than, another pupil that maybe you've met on St. John's Ward, or, maybe they're able for a lot less, and maybe this month they're able for a certain amount and next month it's a bit less. So I think tweaking it on an ongoing basis and, constantly keeping in contact with the school is just so important. And then another challenge is that they're conscious of looking different. I think, we all know that teens can be very self-conscious anyways. So looking that little bit different, that they might be very conscious of that going into school. Even the fear of being asked about their medical condition, they may just want to go on and act like, nothing has changed. And we have to respect that. But I think it's always good for, somebody on staff to be aware that they're conscious of that, and that they want to just be treated like everybody else, so that, they can be, that can be respected. So the importance of staying engaged. So how do we do that? So I've kind of broken it down into 3 areas. So, I guess something that's been really, I wouldn't say it's been drilled into me, but it's just something that's really stayed with me in my, brief time in Our Lady's Hospital School, is that the smallest little engagement that a student makes actually makes a huge difference in the long run. And so what I mean by that is, it may only seem like they are tapping into 1 or 2 subjects a week, or they might be only doing 1 assignment a week, but just staying that engaged that little bit, as much as they are able for, makes a huge difference. And down the road, they'll see during their journey that, oh yeah, I have actually stayed in touch with school. I did do really well in that subject area, and I tried my best in that area. It really it really does help to keep them engaged and to discourage them from disengaging from school. So there's also psychological and social benefits. So just to touch on those briefly, well-being is a huge, I guess I wouldn't say, well, it's not a huge issue. I'm lost for words here, but just well-being is something that we really focus on in school. I think in all schools now, particularly kind of post-pandemic, but the well-being of children who are undergoing treatment, staying engaged with school and being a part of their peer group is just so important. And it boosts their self-esteem. It helps them to build their coping strategies and their resilience to keep going. And then the social benefits, they have a greater sense of belonging. They feel, a sense of normality. They have face-to-face connection with their peers. And just to give you an example of what I mean by that, I had a parent approach me very recently about, whether their child would be well enough to complete their junior cycle exams. And I went back to my principal about it to just, ask for best practice and advice. And what we discussed was the fact that, there's kind of twofold. First of all, if you are able to sit, either the exams for your favorite subjects or the exams for subjects that maybe come easier to you than others, gives you a chance to get that true feeling of how it feels to sit an exam. None of us can explain how it feels to sit an exam. So actually being able to sit that exam, gives you that true feeling to prepare you for leaving cert. But also when results come around in September, you're able to celebrate with all of your friends. And that's huge, to be just like everybody else, to just stay connected with friends and peers. That piece is just so important. And I've had that chat with actually a few parents in the past. And it's not until we've talked about that, getting together with your friends, celebrating the fact that, we've got our results, it kind of dawns on them that, maybe we won't shy away completely from exams. Let's think about it. Maybe we will try and, sit 2 or 3 exams or whatever is best for their child at that moment in time. So it's just something really to think about for your child. So how to stay engaged. So I think one huge positive of COVID has been that we all have wonderful online platforms. We've got our Google Classroom, we've got our Teams. A lot of classes are still using email to stay connected. So traditionally, as a teacher on the ward, if a pupil was in for over a week, then I would ask for permission to contact their school. And it was usually their year head, and just to find out, can we prioritize their schoolwork? What should I get done first? What should I do second, etc. with them? But now, a lot of schools are continuing to pop work up onto their online platforms, particularly if they know a pupil is going to be away for a certain amount of time. So that's been actually really useful, and it saves us time because we can just start straight away if the child is feeling up to it at continuing on with their coursework. So that's been really, really useful this year. Homeschool tuition is another support that is there. If you look on the DES website, there's an application form. The consultant that your child is under needs to fill in their section, and then the school principal needs to fill in a section. And if your child has been out for a certain amount of school, then they may be eligible for a homeschool tutor to come and try and bridge that gap and, fill in a bit of the knowledge that they've missed. So it's another thing that you might possibly want to visit. We always try to encourage the children to attend school in person if they can, even if it's on a part-time basis. For everybody, it's going to be different, because that face-to-face contact is so valuable and so important. But again, I know with the fact that COVID is quite high, depending on everybody's situation, they may not feel comfortable doing that, and with infection control. So it's all very personal to each child. Prioritizing core subjects or ones that they enjoy is something that I've found really useful. Arranging for a teacher on staff to be a point of contact for parents is kind of key, so that parents don't have the pressure of having to contact every teacher every week. It can be very overwhelming, and it's a huge job. So if there is one person on staff that maybe the parent is in contact with, that can be really useful. Again, I already mentioned sitting exams in whatever capacity is possible for your child at that given moment can really help to stay engaged. Having friends, and this is actually something that I've done on the ward, is that if an assignment is up on Google Classroom and it's not really specific, well, a lot of the kids will just get out their phones and text a friend. You know, teens always have their phones on them, and get more specifics about whatever the assignment is, and then we're able to start on it straight away. So that's been really useful. Also, picking a couple of subjects to focus on while in hospital has been great. You know, we're not going to get through the entire set of subjects. They may not even be feeling well enough to do that, but even just picking one or two, you know, gives them that sense that, yes, I have stayed engaged in school. I've been trying my best, you know, and I'm tipping away slowly, but I'm going to get there. And then having a buddy in school, you know, somebody that they can kind of rely on and say, do you know what, I'm really not feeling great today. You know, I think I need my rest period earlier, or, you know, somebody to maybe even get them it's a drink of water or whatever. Just a friend to rely on can encourage them to just maybe even stay for a little bit longer in school if possible. And then I have some feedback that we had a questionnaire on the ward for the teens, and some of the parents and pupils very kindly provided me with some feedback on how they feel about staying engaged with school and about the service that our school provides for them. So a few of the tidbits that I thought I'd share with you this evening were, you know, some who had maybe missed out on this kind of September, October section of first year felt that it was a huge worry about establishing a new friend group. So they weren't there at the very beginning. They missed that because they were in hospital or they were really unwell. And because they missed that introductory section, they were really concerned, not about the schoolwork necessarily, but about the fact that they've missed out on making a few new pals. So that's been a huge focus for some of the students. You know, they see on TikTok and you know, everything else that they're missing out on outings and parties and discos. And so that's another concern, you know, that they're missing out on those things. So even just staying engaged and having video calls, I would have never been one as a parent to be an advocate for online gaming, but yes, you know, getting out the PlayStation or the Xbox, whatever it may be, and playing games with their friends online, you know, it just keeps them in contact with their friends. And then, you know, they might even be talking about what was going on in school. And again, it's another link to keep them engaged. Some are conscious that they have gaps in their knowledge, and that can be a real fear going back to school. You know, it can stop some of the pupils from going back. You know, they just feel like, oh, I've missed too much. I'm so behind them. What's the point? And we don't want that to happen. So that's why we want to try to keep a little bit of an engagement all the way along, if possible. Some are anxious that they won't know their teachers. You know, they've missed out on the kind of getting to know you at the very beginning. And so their teachers don't know them, and they don't know their teachers. So that can create anxiety. It can create fear. So again, like I said, tipping away little bits can kind of alleviate that or lessen it a little bit. Being able to cover even a small portion of their coursework while in hospital can lessen some of those feelings. I've seen it firsthand. You'd be amazed you walk in and somebody really doesn't want to do any schoolwork, but I'm uber enthusiastic, and some feel bad about saying no to me. So they give in, and you'd be amazed at they actually admit afterward, actually, I'm glad I did that. You know, just pushing themselves to do some, you know, little task can actually really change their frame of mind, their well-being, their attitude. And then lastly, staying engaged with school adds a little bit of normality. You know, when I walk in, I'm not poking and prodding. We're just doing school. We're not talking about necessarily how they're feeling today, or, you know, we certainly aren't talking about the, you know, the journey they're on for the next week, let's say, of their treatment plan. You know, I actually wouldn't know most of that. We're just talking about school and, you know, overall, how are they feeling and do they have any news? You know, it's really kind of a normal setting, as much as it can be in a hospital room. So yeah, just having that little bit of engagement can really make them feel normal for a little bit of their day. And I think that's about all I have to say. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I've left my email address there, so erica@olhs.ie, and I hope that that has been beneficial for a few of you out there. So thanks so much.
Thanks a million, Erica, and thanks for sharing your email address. I can definitely see how it'd be hard to say no to you. But maybe I can say the same, or you might be sitting here this evening if you're able to say no to me. Thanks a million. That was really informative and very practical. I think some really good practical tips there as well. And thanks for sharing the students' perspectives. I think you know, it's really good to hear the both situations, what's happening in mainstream school and how we can facilitate there, but also what happens when the kids are in hospital and on treatment. So thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
And I know Lucy's presentation ties in quite nicely with yours, Erica, because while you've talked about some of the options that are available, Lucy has actually experienced them with Owen. So I think that's quite a nice follow on. Lucy, if you're ready to go.
Yeah. I've started trying to share my screen now.
Maybe
hopefully it works.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, Owen was diagnosed at 11. He was in 5th class, so we did 5th class, 6th class, and then into secondary school. Secondary school was very daunting, and Owen had been out of school a lot during treatment. He missed an awful lot of school. I think nearly from 1st year to 6th year. He did very few full days because of different things that had happened along the way. So trying to find our way with the school was a very interesting journey, but we stayed very well engaged with the school. As Ger said, that really was what stood to us. So hopefully now this is going to work. Yeah, and then I suppose looking at the differences between primary and secondary school. In primary school, there was one teacher, one classroom, one desk, and the same group of kids, which meant that before Owen came in, the whole desk used to get wiped down with the cloths, the sterilising cloths, and his chair, and everything was organised for him. But in secondary school, it was a multiple of all the above: multiple teachers, multiple classrooms, multiple desks, and lots of different kids. He went from being in a group of 30 in primary school to a group of 150 in secondary school. So then it was like seeking clarity on who to contact and how to contact them. And it was also moving from primary to secondary school, whereas kids don't mind you going in to a degree into primary school. They don't really want a parent coming in past the gate. Now, this is the kids I'm talking about. They don't want their mammy coming in past the gate in secondary school. So that was something that we faced as well. So it was to try and set up the links there with the school to figure out how we were going to do that. And then looking at like how Owen would manage classroom changes and mixing with different groups of kids. It was quite the challenge going into secondary school. And then again, looking at developing the key contacts in the school. Who is the best person to contact? Is it the year head, the class tutor, the special needs coordinator, or the attendance officer? And actually we discovered that different people fulfilled different needs for us. The year head, I used to email her. I used to email her all the appointments, what was happening that week, where he was, how he was, and then she would distribute the information among teachers that would need to know. So it meant that teachers also knew not to ask Owen. We did have an agreement that they wouldn't ask Owen, particularly how he was. So he could just kind of get on with his day when he was there, but he would know, key people would know what was going on. He knew his year head at all points. He could go to her at any point in the day as well if he needed her. But it also meant that he needed to take more control of his day as well. So, you know, if he wasn't well enough, he would go to the attendance officer who would ring me and he'd come home. So he knew where to go. and what to do and how to manage his day and who were the key people who were going to help him out. And then, you know, again, as was spoken about already, and arranging a meeting with key people in the school to set out the concerns, to hand in reports, and to discuss and agree expectations. So they knew what to expect from me, I knew what to expect from them, and we knew that we were all kind of working together and to pick up the phone, whatever was happening in school. Then managing attendance and appointments or not feeling well, how all of those things were going to be managed. Like Owen suffered very badly with fatigue and very rarely got in for 9 o'clock, usually got in for 2nd or 3rd class. But all of that was organised through the attendance officer. She kept a good record of all of that, his attendance and when he got in and out of school. And then, like I said, and then looking at if he wasn't feeling well, what would we do? And I suppose I was trying to maximise him getting into school. So, and steroid week was a very difficult week for Owen. I remember one week going in to collect him and the school were saying to me, why did you send him in? Now, he hadn't been the way he was, you know, as the day wore on and the steroids kicked in and he was, I nearly had to catch him when I went into school. He was totally like not good or well in himself. So it was trying to get a gauge of what he could actually manage. And then the school started to learn steroid week was a very difficult week for him as well. So they watched him that bit more. They checked in with him that bit more. So it's trying to manage all of those things and working together with the school. And then looking at how information will be shared. And then also to look at, is there a care team in the school? And in our local school, there actually is a care team, which comprises of like the chaplain, the year heads, the special needs coordinators, all of those people, and they would share information there. So the year head would take information to the care team as well to look at, is there anything else that can be done? Is there anything else that can happen that would actually support on getting in and out of school? Then looking at the physical space and supports in school, again, that's managing attendance and working along with the attendance officer, looking at toilet access and hygiene needs. And that was a big concern. One of the things that we were very lucky, it's not in every school, I don't think, but we were very lucky that there was a disability toilet that Owen was given a key to, which meant that that kept him a lot safer in terms of the amount of kids using that bathroom. That there's an elevator in the school as well, and he had spinal fractures at one point during his treatment, and he had access to the elevator, so he didn't have to climb the stairs, which was also kind of a dangerous enough spot, big piles of teenagers up and down the stairs, so it meant he felt a lot safer as well. Then managing the school bag and the books, I mean, I think that's a big concern for a lot of parents. And what the school actually did was they had a book rental scheme in the school. So they actually kept him a set of books in the school. There was a book in each of his classrooms that he was in, and he had a set of books at home. So he didn't have to carry books backwards and forwards. And we were very lucky with that. Like I said, it's not available in all schools, but it's well worth checking to see if it's available in your child's school. Then looking at the lunchtime space as well, looking at a place that was quiet, that he could actually sit down and rest as well. And looking as well at a place to rest if he needed it during the day. And we utilised the resource centre in the school. He was able to go down and take a bit of space in the resource centre if he was very tired or really struggling. And then again, as was spoken about already, accommodation for exams, looking at how he would manage and looking at what extra supports he might need in terms of accommodation for exams, and to talk to the school about that. And then to look at what other supports might be available in the school. It's always worth having that conversation and checking that out. And then the emotional supports, I suppose, look for the young person themselves to know what to do if they're feeling overwhelmed, sick, or needing a rest. You know, who do they go to? Where do they go? Who are their key people? And then, you know, is there a school counsellor available? Which there was in our school, and that was a great support too. And then the link person, like I said, between home and school, figuring out who's that best person. Then finding support among peers. Owen's peers were great when he was in school, because there was actually like a little space set aside in the staff room where they used to send up homework, or sometimes the kids would send messages home. And then we had a home tutor who used to come from the school to our house to do home tuition with Owen, and she used to bring all this different stuff with her, which kept a great connection between school and home. And then knowing when school is just too much, that's a difficult one, I think, for parents trying to manage. And then you get conflicting information, and you have conflicting feelings about it as well, wanting to maximise their time in school. But what I found was not wanting him to be in school when he wasn't in good shape, when it was steroid week and he wasn't feeling well, that there's a huge exposure among his peers when he was vulnerable like that. So it's trying to balance all of those things out. And it's a constant juggle, I found, to try and figure out what was the best thing to do. And then looking at school as a social support and the importance of connecting with his peers. And that became a really crucial piece for school, to actually keep connection with peers and with friends. And to allow that to happen, we did have to look at doing some negotiation around homework, because sometimes just getting to school was enough. Trying to do homework on top of that would have actually, and him having to bring in homework might actually have stopped him from going in. So it's trying to gauge what they're actually able to do. Then knowing what to do when things are difficult. So for the young person themselves to know where to go, like I said, when struggling, and looking at creating options to help them manage. Then balancing school attendance, education and ability, trying to balance out all of those things, looking at managing exposure when they're emotionally or physically vulnerable, and getting a gauge of what's needed to support education. And that's where I think looking at, where are the areas that they're struggling, and looking at what supports can be put in place, what assessments might need to be done at an early age to try and pick up any difficulties that are happening. Like Owen got a laptop as support because he was able to type much, much faster than he was able to write. So that allowed him that space to get that done as well. And then, the idea of wanting to leave it all behind, but needing support. So it's then looking at how that support can be put in place, that it can be done without drawing too much attention, to the young person in school, that you look at who are the key people that talk to them about providing that support and how that engagement happens with the school. And then managing the education supports, like would home tuition be appropriate, engaging a tutor, and is there a tutor available for the school? Now, we accessed home tuition in 5th class, 6th class, and from 1st to 6th year. I think he got 5 hours home tuition when he was in primary school and 7 hours across 1st, 2nd, 3rd year. And then it was reduced again 5th year and 6th year because he was able to get into school a bit more. But it meant that a lot of his educational needs were managed through home tuition as well. So he didn't have the trying to manage all the education piece, as well as managing the social piece, as well as managing being in school and being tired and not being well. And then looking at what resources needed within the school as well. Like what we realised after a while was that we actually needed him to be in school to be able to access resource in school. And his attendance at school was so low at one point that we realised that home tuition actually filled the need a lot better. But it's figuring out for your child how the need is filled best for them. And then engaging supports from the local OT and the physiotherapist. And that allowed us to access the reasonable accommodation for exams. It allowed him to access the technology. It allowed lots of different supports that can be there as well. So looking at the OT, taking a look at them to see how they can actually support their needs as well. And then giving due consideration to subjects studied and at what level. Like one of the things that we looked at was with the lack of attendance at school and some missing out on some subjects as well, that looking at whereas in a different circumstance, he may have done higher level, looking at saying, well, look, pull it back to ordinary level, we'll reassess then for Leaving Cert. And we had that negotiation with the school to look at him managing what he could manage and doing some of the exams, but pitching the exams at what he was actually going to be able to do and achieve as well. But it didn't necessarily set it in stone for Leaving Cert. And then the social needs of it, again, needing contact with his peers, looking at the homework and classroom expectations, that there wouldn't be an expectation of him getting homework done, and he wouldn't be asked for that in class necessarily, but that if he did have it, that he would also hand it up. Looking at managing PE or any other kind of physical subject, how that was going to happen. Like if there's some trouble with hands or physical coordination, that sometimes like a subject like woodwork can be a more difficult subject, or home economics, you know, some of those more physical subjects can be a little bit more difficult. And then to look at who's the go-to person in school to discuss whatever issues are arising. I mean, like that's come up in kind of what I'm saying here again and again, to look at who is the key person in the school. And sometimes it's somebody different for something different, looking at how you're going to manage all of that. And then just gathering for DARE, and it's looking at, you know, kind of keeping a good record of the days, the part days or full days that they're in school, keeping the relevant records, figuring out what assessment and reports are needed, and linking to the OT, physiotherapist and the psychology services, and just getting that stuff in place early, because it also supports what's happening in secondary school as well. And then this, just the summary points of the home tuition, the Department of Education website, the application for medical need, the form needs sign off by the consultant, and the letter confirming diagnosis. I found them very, very helpful in the home tuition department, and they turned around the application for home tuition within a week or two. We never had to wait. Any of the years that we applied for, we didn't have to wait. They put it through very quickly. Then just the hospital OT helped us to access local OT services to do the assessment of needs for the special accommodation for school, for the exams, the laptop, the separate exam centre, and the resource department in the school assisted with the application. And then facing into university, it's crucial that access to DARE and third level supports are available if required. Supports for educating teachers are crucial, and we weren't aware of any services available for this. And I understand that Barrettstown now have an outreach programme. I'm not hugely familiar with it, but I am aware that it's there. And then I suppose the hygiene and health issues through treatment, and the importance of keeping the door open in school so a child can attend when they're well enough, and looking to keep them engaged in school from a social and education perspective, and to keep them engaged with their peers and understand the pitfalls of repeating a school year. Like that would have been a very big stressor for Owen, not wanting to repeat a year. Now I know for some kids it's entirely appropriate, but I know for him it was not something he wanted to do, because he wanted to remain with his peer group. And then I suppose just one last piece, and it's nearly another webinar itself, is a greater understanding of the impact of a sibling having cancer also needs consideration in the school. My youngest child came home at one point and he said to me, ask me how many people asked me how I am today. Or no, he said, ask me how many people asked me about Owen today. And I said, I've no idea. And I think he had a number of like 14 people. And then he said, ask me how many people asked me how I am. And he said, none. So sometimes the impact on a sibling is huge as well. And it's worth just kind of bearing that in mind too. So that's kind of the end of my piece. And then just the home tuition application form that I just have there as well. So hope that's helpful to somebody.
Thanks so much, Lucy. That's I can guarantee that's really, really helpful. You've just, I suppose, shown the application of everything that has come up so far and how it worked for you and for Owen. There was a couple of things I just wanted to mention quickly, like the sibling thing absolutely is a whole webinar in itself. You know, it really is. The DARE, when you mentioned, I just want to remind people that we had a webinar on DARE last November. So that's why we have not really gone into very much detail on it tonight at all. You'll find that on our website, and there was loads of information for anyone who's approaching that stage. And there was a couple of questions, Lucy. Let me just get them up here. One was from Claire, and it was just about who you felt was Owen's, I can't put my hand on it now, but I think it was who you felt was Owen's best advocate in school in terms of all of the different contacts that you mentioned.
To be honest, at different times, different teachers were brilliant. The year head was a crucial piece, I found, in terms of emailing into her, and that she knew that if he ever appeared in her classroom, that he was in bother. But he also then was able to access the resource centre in the school, that he was able to just pop down there if he was struggling as well. The teachers down there knew him. But the attendance officer was also an absolutely fantastic support. So it was really just trying to pick out those key people in your school that's going to work, you know. So and even the secretaries in the school were great, you know. So once they kind of saw him coming and he looked a bit like he wasn't having a great day, there was usually a couple of people in to check and make sure that he was okay. He knew he could go to them.
Okay, thanks. I suppose what I took from everything you were saying, Lucy, is, you know, how important it is for you to advocate for Owen's needs, but also for him to learn those self-advocacy skills to get him through the day and the week. And I'm sure he's still having to put those into practice now that he's in third level. You know, it's all down to him essentially at this stage. So they're essential skills.
It's an essential skill that they do learn. They do pick it up very quickly. Like he did pick it up very quickly in terms of what he was able to manage. And then some days he'd say to me, I am just not able for today. And I have to respect that, you know, and say, well, what are we going to do? What can you do today? And then he would figure that out, you know. And like, in testament to the amount of school he missed, the fact that we supplemented with home tuition, he's now in first year in university. So he's actually got to where he needed to go. And I know I worried so much about that. Would he fall out of education? How wrong could this all go when he was missing like 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 2 weeks, you know? So it's just trying to keep them as engaged as you can. Yeah.
There's a comment from Mary that I think kind of ties into what you're going to talk about, Mary Claire, because it's a question about establishing if memory has been affected by chemotherapy or if it's something else. And I know we don't always have those answers. There's no black and white, you know, there's no way sometimes to tell what the cause is, but I suppose it's about looking at where your child is at and the impact that it's having on their education and their schooling. Jerry, I don't know if you'd have anything to add there, that you know, it's looking at the impact with the school.
Yeah, I think so much of it again comes back to the individual case all of the time, and each school will have its own specific, I suppose, systems and structures. Going back to that last one for supporting students in different ways. So every school will have its own version of a care team and its own system with year heads and so on. And it's really about that conversation of linking in there and that part. Some of the practical things then again are it's, you know, I could refer to the school I'm in now where everything is one-to-one device school. So it's iPads, you know, so you don't really have the issues with the books then, but that's particular to one school. And there's workarounds for everything. If we go back to get into that key point first of being able to link in, and it goes, I think, maybe like what Erica was saying earlier as well, one of the beauties or I suppose positives to take from the last 2 years with the experience of every school having to go online is there isn't a secondary school in the country at this stage that is not equipped to be able to operate with a virtual learning environment. And it doesn't matter what they call that or what that looks like, but every teacher in the country now is also well I suppose, equipped or would have the knowledge or the capacity to be able to do so, which wasn't necessarily in every school's area of interest or wouldn't have been seen as something that was important now. And I could see how what you were saying, Erica, that can really work and move forward now. And I think it's very much part of what every school is looking to try and do. And it's a great resource to be able to see how there's benefits operating in that regard too. And just without, I know I'm going slightly differently there as well, but just one of the points that Lucy made there in relation to the sibling piece as well is a piece that is often not thought of. When I was referring to the continuum of support, it is absolutely legitimate for a sibling to be supported through the continuum of support as well. It doesn't have to be the specific student, because if there is a knock-on impact in terms of a sibling and how their progression may be impacted upon at different points in time, it is absolutely legitimate to raise the question of how do we help all of the children in the family, and that's something that people don't think of first. And again, it can be difficult for the school to see it sometimes, especially if it's a sibling joining a school that maybe there is nobody else, like, so it could be a younger sibling that's currently in primary school that is undergoing treatment or whatever. And again, if you don't share that, there's no way for the school to be able to do it. So that's a really good point about the sibling, but there is a solution there too, to try and help and assist, I suppose.
Yeah,
just one question that's come in there, just asking me about how we managed to cover the wide range of subjects. In first year, we had one tutor, and she covered the wide range of subjects that way, which managed quite well. But as he went through the curriculum, that became a little bit more difficult. So at one point, we had 3 tutors, and they shared out the home tuition hours. We agreed it through the year, and we moved them around and switched them around. And I did that by agreement with the department as well. So I'd say to them from kind of November to December, and I'd give the dates. This teacher's going to have 2 hours, that teacher's going to have 4 hours. You know, we swapped them around. So we had like 3 tutors at one point, which covered a much wider array of subjects. So that was how that was managed. I hope that helps answer the question.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks, Lucy. I also just want to say, Erica, Evelyn, anyone else who wants to come in or comment on these days, just use the raise hand function. I'm not forgetting about you. So I'll move on to Mary Claire, because your experience is a bit different to Lucy's, and I think it will be really useful for people to hear about it as well, because there'll be a lot of people in this situation where you know, Alice had finished treatment by the time you got to secondary school, so it's slightly different to Lucy's experience. Are you okay there with the slides, Mary Claire? If you, sorry, I've lost where I am.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
yes.
you.
Hi everybody, and thank you for all the presentations to date. They've been really, really fantastic. I am just really following on from Lucy's presentation. Both Owen and Alice were diagnosed very close together. Alice was diagnosed with APML leukemia in 2013 when she was age 10, and she was in 4th class in national school. We attended Cronly. We didn't attend a shared care hospital, which was the same as Owen. So firstly, I'd say I agree with absolutely everything that Lucy has spoken about, and there's some really, really good words of wisdom and advice. And I've got to say that Lucy and their school were just listening to everything that they did, were huge advocates for Owen, which is testament to the fact that he's in 3rd level now and succeeded so well. So I think I just have one or two, just a few extra things to add to that. So to show how every child is different and has unique needs. So in our case, Alice, as I say, she was 10 and she was diagnosed with leukemia when she was in 4th class. She was in treatment for 2.5 years and she completed her treatment in the summer before she started secondary school. Up to that time, we had a lot of absences from primary school, a full block of 2 terms absence after she was diagnosed because the school just happened to be doing a school building program, so it was too dangerous for her to go to school because of the risk of aspergillus, which is just a risk that when their children are around active building works. But I think looking back, she probably was too ill to go to school in any event, and we were in and out of hospital during that time. And then when we moved into 5th and 6th classes, she settled down in treatment. We still had a lot of absences up and down to the hospital, and there would be blips. And one of the major problems is fatigue. Also, the hair loss was, and looking different from her peers, was a major challenge for her. So if she had any reason not to go to school, I've got to say she would choose to stay at home. But throughout, she had a wonderful group of friends who really kind of crowded around her and protected her. And you know, the school were fantastic. They were really, really supportive and very protective of Alice. Like, for example, there was she had a very traumatic incident one time when her wig fell off completely accidental, came off in the playground. So she thought nobody in the school knew that she was even sick. So that was a major traumatic incident for her. I'd say post-traumatic stress, etc. And it was a while before she returned to school. But again, as I say, the school were very supportive in helping us work through that. So she didn't want anyone to know about her cancer, just wanted to be treated like any other of her friends. So one thing that I do, looking back now, I know it has changed, is that I wasn't involved in the report that went from the primary school to the secondary school, but I think that has changed now. So I suppose, and everything, and particularly what Ger mentioned, the secondary school needs to know about your child, needs to know about their unique specific needs, needs to know their history, needs to know how they're faring, needs to know the child, the personality, everything as much as possible about the child, so that they know what supports required to be put in place. So I think we missed that very essential link at that point, because I suppose Alice wanted to move on to secondary school have a fresh start. She wanted nobody to know about her history. And I suppose we were finished and very thankful to be finished treatment and would be moving on. And we felt it was a very good start into secondary school and starting to attend clinics in Cronly, which were every month. Then they moved to 3 months, then they moved to 6 months, etc. So I suppose when she started secondary school, we didn't look for any supports. So I thought everything was going just fine. And in fairness, looking back, everything was going fine because she had average grades, but you know, she was missing a lot of school, but she was still managing. But most important thing for us was that she was very confident, extremely confident and very happy, and had very good friends, and wasn't missing out on anything social, any outings, anything like that. But as the years in kind of secondary school went by, the junior cycle, everything seemed to go all right. Tiredness, fatigue, as I say, was a huge factor, and a number of days missed from just general infections and trips up to for clinic, etc. But then I suppose we moved, now jumping ahead then into the senior cycle. She was unfortunately impacted by COVID, and the homeschooling just really did not suit her. She really needed one-on-one. And then we realized once, and she also, COVID affected the first part of 6th year when everything came to a head. We realized that she wasn't coping. Sorry, move to the next slide. Yeah, we realized she wasn't coping. She had too many subjects. Her expectations and our expectations and the teachers and schools' expectations were too high. She had too much information, too much homework, and she had came into a complete overload. She became completely overwhelmed with school and with the level of homework. She would stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning doing homework, and it became a vicious cycle, because then she couldn't get up the next morning. And I would say there's no point in going to school for this morning, because she's got too exhausted, not going to be able to concentrate on anything. So then I would let her go in late. So as I say, it all came to a head, and I picked up the phone to the principal. And the principal had known Alice throughout her education, had known her in primary school and also in secondary school, but she just would not have been aware of the full impact of the side effects of treatment, or the exhaustion, or the just being swamped in a feeling of kind of helplessness, because she had become so overwhelmed by the volume of information, the volume of work and volume of subjects she needed to do. So we then sought professional help, and she was diagnosed with ADHD inattentive with slow cognitive processing speed. So in fairness, she was delighted when we did that, because she said, "Mom, everything in this report makes sense. I told you about all of these things." So it really was, I'm so glad we did it. And it really opened the door for support, although at a late stage, but everything was that we needed was then put in place. The principal was hugely supportive and of enormous help. The first thing she did, she said, "I couldn't believe that we never did a handwriting speed test for Alice." And they did that all during COVID, and her handwriting speed was terribly slow, which then meant that which explained why she could never finish an exam, why she'd only get 3 questions done, not the 4th question, why she could never take notes down from the board, why she was saying, "That teacher is useless, he won't give me notes." You know, there was an explanation for everything. So I know I'm not going to go into the DARE, but the DARE application process then highlighted all the supports that could be put in place. And with 2020 vision, these are supports that we should have sought much earlier on. I feel if I had been maybe a better advocate for a child, but also if I had realized that she was struggling. So I suppose it was a two-way situation. I should have had more feedback from the school. The school should have been more aware of what her difficulties were and of her history, and what might have been of assistance. And had I known about what the various supports were, and combined with that knowledge from the school, I could have said, well, maybe this would help, or maybe that would help, or maybe she shouldn't be doing higher level this, and maybe she shouldn't be doing that class, and she should use that class for finishing her homework. Or the school needs to be more flexible because she needs more time to do her assignments. She needs more time to do her homework. She needs more instruction in how to approach an exam, not to spend so much time on the questions that have much lower points than the ones that are the more important questions. So as I say, the school were fantastic. They did help to do all this and to assist us. And I've got to say, it all worked out well in the end, because she's now in almost finished first year in NUIG. But I think her learning difficulties, kind of inverted commas, could have been helped by having some of the supports that previous speakers spoke about and having them in place. So I think my tips is really to try to stay involved with the school and your child, to recognize and deal with any difficulties at an early stage, and to know about the supports, because they may be needed, not at the beginning, not in first or second year, but they may be needed in transition year or 5th or 6th year. Teachers change and pupil numbers are very high. So you must ensure that your child's teachers know about the situation, and generally they're very willing to help and willing to accommodate with extra time or whatever is required in your unique situation. And then just the last point is to choose your subjects wisely and appropriate for your child. You know, in our case, subjects that had a lot more project work just suited much better than the subjects that were wholly exam based. So and then we were also, just I'll leave you with this, we were given a liaison teacher at the very kind of in 6th year. And I think having a liaison teacher, we should have had one from the beginning, and that's nobody's fault. It's just the circumstances. But I think she didn't really gel with this liaison teacher in 6th year, and it was just yet another person she had to deal with, and she was already overwhelmed. So this person was just another person as opposed to a person that was going to help. But if it was somebody at the very beginning of the junior cycle, and somebody who had a full understanding of her situation, and somebody that she liked, somebody that she knew, and somebody that she trusted, and that would have made the world of a difference. But as I say, with supports from various people, and I thank Lucy here for putting me on the right path with Dare also. As I say, I'm very pleased to say it all worked out in the end, but it's important to have the knowledge of all of this at the early stages of secondary education, because the supports and the helps are there. It's knowing how to put them in place and when to put them in place. So thank you.
Thanks a million, Mary Claire. And yeah, look, I'm absolutely delighted that everything worked out in the end. And I suppose it's not about, you saying, oh, I should have been a better advocate. I think everybody can identify with wanting a clean slate, moving on to secondary, that being a fresh start. And also just running a busy family and household, and hoping that everybody's okay and on the straight and narrow, because you have other kids to focus on and other issues to focus on. But I suppose what we've heard here tonight, over and over, and from people's experiences, is that the benefit of being open with the school outweighs that need to move on, and that they're not that they can work together. You can still move on and have your child can have their independence and not be labelled, but they can still have the supports that they need, that are going to help them. Mary Claire, can you stop your screen share there? I just want to check, are we okay with questions? Laura, have I missed anything?
No, there is one question here. Is there any plan to recognise childhood cancer in the IEPs or the 504 plans, as they do in England? Does any of our teachers or our panel know the answer to that? If not, Mary, we will revert to you. We will endeavour to get information for you and send it on to you.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have specific knowledge of that. That wouldn't be something that would be determined at a school level. That would be determined by the special education, the National Council for Special Education. So the NCSE would be the primary ones that would be looking at something like that.
Okay. And then just one other, thank you, Michael, for your query. Could somebody expand on the role of a liaison teacher?
Lucy, maybe that's one for you, given that you have a lot of experience with it.
I'm just wondering what the liaison teacher do you mean between home and school? Because like the person that we would have used for that was the year head, and I did that mostly by email. And then she would have emailed me back and said, I'm going to pass this information on to the other teachers, and she would actually forward on an email and include me in it as well. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, if that's the liaison teacher that's been asked about.
Okay. And Michael, you can use the raise hand function if you want to ask your question or expand on that. Yeah, okay, I think that's answered that. I wanted to say something about DARE. Oh yeah, that was just, it's been mentioned a few times. It's the disability access route to education. I know a lot of people might not have to worry about it at the moment, but I suppose I just want to say the benefit of using it, say in both Owen and Alice's case, is that they're linked in with the disability office and the disability services in their third level setting from the beginning. So again, keeping that continuum of support going into third level. So that's a huge benefit. And
it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to need it, but I think the fact that they link in if they hit trouble, I think it's a really good backup to have. And it's the gathering of information, like all the missed absences, all that information all feeds into DARE.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to any questions that I've missed in a couple of minutes.
There's just one other question there, Jerry, you might be able to help with regard to advice on getting an Irish exemption for her daughter who's nearly 4 years.
Yeah, and again, that's a piece. I just see the question there. Again, I suppose there's some misnomers in relation to Irish exemptions, that when Joe McHugh was Minister for Education, he kind of revamped it and changed it, and there was a lot communicated that you didn't need to report anymore, and all of that is true, and that it was up now to the school principal to determine whether you could have an exemption or not. And that's not quite true either. What it's really about is assessing at a school level where the child is at in terms of their learning. Now, there may be within that, and again, it's bespoke to each individual there, that it states in the question that there was nearly 4 years of school missed. There may be an avenue through that. Technically, it refers to being outside of the Irish system. And I see your point that you were registered in an Irish school. There may be something that could be pursued by the school there, because there is a gap in the educational journey, if you like. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is there is a really strong case there for extra support. And if you go back to your continuum of support there, for the child to be able to receive additional support there, if that's applicable, and if that's reasonable, and if that's possible, obviously, at this point in time. And that's kind of a classic example there of what I was referring to earlier on, as on the continuum of support. If there is a gap of period, that's another way of flipping it. And instead of trying to struggle at the same level as everybody else, you're absolutely entitled there to get specific interventions to bring you up to speed. There may be wider elements there that have impacted on learning, that you can essentially look at capturing testing within a school, and it would be linked really to speech and language, and you can then do an intervention program again with the special educational needs department in the school, that they might try a 6 to 12 week intervention, and you retest at the end. And if the intervention hasn't worked, and if the scores are low in terms of speech and language, there may be an avenue there to get the exemption. I would say in relation to that one really would be to try and organise a meeting with the special educational needs organiser and principal in the school, and really to put forward your case there, an explanation of all of that, and to try and look at it in the round and see what the best possibility is. It looks like there may be some options there, but it's really hard to say from the outside when I don't know the specific details. And if there's a speech and language piece in the mix, and the other piece is, can you flip it and make up the deficit in terms of the time gap if there is no speech and language issue, and is it possible to actually bridge the gap and bring yourself back up to speed, rather than saying I want the exemption. So yeah, I know that's a long-winded answer to it, but there isn't a straightforward short answer in lots of ways to that.
Yeah, I think that's hopefully helpful, Ger, because it's not clear cut. So yeah, trying to come at it from different angles. Thank you for that.
I suppose in summary, it's bespoke to the child again.
Yeah.
So you can only really drill into that when you're talking about the very specifics of the child. Yeah.
Yeah. Lucy, do you want to come in there?
Could I just throw a piece in to say that sometimes it might be looking at the level, that foundation level may be the appropriate level, which, kind of is not a huge ask academically to manage a subject. So that may be an option as well, that there isn't as much work involved.
Yeah, that's an option as well. Thanks, Lucy. Okay, I just want to come to Evelyn. Evelyn, thank you very much for joining us. Evelyn is manager of Canteen Ireland, and if you're not familiar with their services. They've a huge range of support for adolescents and young people with cancer and survivors. Evelyn, I'll let you take over, and if you wanted to add anything to what anybody else has said, please feel free. Can I just check, Evelyn, do you want me to share your documents?
Yeah, if you can. Is that okay, Fionnuala?
Will do.
So I think I know a few people on this as well. Some of the parents I know from being on Discord earlier with their young people, their children.
And I forgot to mention, or did I mention, I'm having a moment now that it's Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Awareness Week this week.
Yeah, so that's an international awareness week. So we're trying to raise awareness about young adults and young people with cancer. So for those of you who don't know me, I work with Canteen Ireland, and Canteen has actually been around since 1990. Now we're quite small, as in I'm the only employee, so we depend hugely on our volunteers. And we support young people between the ages of 12 and 25 if they've had cancer before they're 12 or between the ages of 12 and 25. And then even at 25, they can take a year out and come back and volunteer, which is brilliant because a lot of our volunteers had cancer as a young person and they know exactly what it's like. I was a nurse in a previous life, but I'm working with Canteen now for 20 years. So yeah, I'm older than most parents now. I was the baby when I started. So yeah, I'm feeling, I still think I'm a teenager. That's the only thing. So we support and empower and develop our young people with cancer. And primarily how we do that is through our peer support program. So it's really about young people supporting each other through their cancer journey, like from diagnosis. People might join, you know, when they finish treatment. People could join when they've had cancer at 1 or 2, and then when they're 12, they might join us. So we've a whole range of people, like from maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years even now. A lot of volunteers would have been treated even 30 years ago. So it's really nice, and it's a positive thing to see people getting on with their life. And I suppose before COVID, we had mostly residential weekends away. So we'd go to different centres. We have been to all activity centres throughout Ireland, like Carlingford, Tana. We've been to Bardstown. We've also gone to Alton Towers in England every 2 years, the theme park over there. And we actually went to Disneyland in Paris back in 2017 because we were very lucky to get a big a group of guys fundraising for us. So we decided to have a big splash, and we went with 55 and came home with 55. So that was an achievement, considering only 2 of us could probably speak a bit of French. But yeah, it was a brilliant weekend and highly recommend it. We also then have day meetings where they'd have a chat in the morning, something to do with cancer or whatever they really like to talk about. And then in the afternoon, we go like on an activity like bowling, quasar, escape rooms, all different kind of stuff. And we've worked with a lot of other groups as well. So we do music and arts weekend with Helium Arts, and we work with other charities and with other groups. In England, we used to go to the Teenage Cancer Trust conference called Find Your Sense of Humour, which was an amazing weekend. And unfortunately, due to financial issues, we cannot go there anymore, but it was amazing. We've been going there since 2002, right up until before COVID. So now I suppose we're mostly online support. So we haven't met up yet really physically yet because we're still kind of a bit nervous, I suppose, about it all. But we did manage to work quite well, like I would say very well overall considering online. And we've had loads of Zoom. Every week we have Zoom or Discord gaming, and then we have workshops every 1 to maybe twice a month. So we've music, art, drama, exercise. We started an exercise program just last year with Exwell Medical, which was 2 classes a week, which is an amazing program. And they work primarily with adults. So this is the pilot program. This is the first time working with young people in Ireland, and it's a really good program. And I suppose for people, they're after treatment, their exercise has really helped them physically balance. You know, the sessions are really well run for the young people, and the facilitators are brilliant, the instructors, and they work on no matter how level of how well you're able to work in the class, and even it's worked via Zoom, so it's worked very well. And then on a Saturday, so we've done our first 12 weeks, and we're just waiting to start our next 12 weeks then in the next couple of months, or the next month or so. So as I said, we are very much, we work a lot with the Childhood Cancer Foundation and with Can Care for Living, and we had our first conference there in last September, and we're having another one this year. And then we're affiliated with the Irish Cancer Society. And I suppose really for us, it's about showing that young people, you know, and I'm always amazed. I know education is so important, but there are so many other routes. And I suppose even now, I suppose they're trying to highlight, you know, other ways of people doing well. And I'm always amazed at how well young people do, like considering missing so much school, and yet we have so many who've got on, especially in health, gone in to be doing medicine, nursing, physio, and they could have missed maybe 6 months or a year, you know, maybe longer throughout their school. Some of them would have been diagnosed in secondary school. But one thing I would really highlight, and I know Mary Claire and Lucy have said that, I think it's really good, and Erica, to engage with the school, because the more you know, the better. And I know sometimes we think, oh, we don't want to have our child think there's, you know, a disability or something wrong. But I think the more help you can get, the easier it will make you. And that's the most important thing. Because, and especially just from working with the young people throughout the years, the DARE program was something that we would have known about, and then we'd come to canteen and we'd tell them about it. And I know for a lot of them, it's been like a lifesaver for them doing their course in college. And like, it can be difficult to get it. It's not everyone, you know, doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it's not. But hopefully now with the National Cancer Control Program, it will be automatic for children with cancer, no matter when they've had a cancer diagnosis. And there is, I suppose it is like keeping in contact with your school as much as possible. And I'm always amazed as well how much they go to school, considering, you know, how sick they are and with fatigue, and they keep up, and, you know, like, they're pretty amazing really. Because I know, you know, the way some people are like, oh, I need like a head cold, and before COVID you'd be looking for a week off, but they try and push themselves so much. But it's important, like, even for just socially, I suppose. And it's, you know, and they will, you know, some of them will struggle, and that's normal. And it's okay. And I suppose just to be okay with that and recognize it. And just, I suppose, to acknowledge the achievements they do. So I know in canteen, some young people would have had like big into sports or something before their treatment. And then that's something that they haven't been able to work at since, because with brain tumors or shunts or something, or physical disability. But maybe it's trying to find something else that they might be good at. So it might be writing or art, and, you know, and there's so many of them with so much talents. I'm always blown away by how talented they are and how much they do achieve, considering what they've been through. So I suppose that's one thing I would just, from talking to anyone, is like, engage as much as possible with the school and the education and anyone. And then if you do need further help, I mean, it is important to find somebody who can get that help. And like the Childhood Cancer Foundation are great to, you know, for information, and Laura and Evelyn, Fanula and Mary Claire there, and link in with people and parents. Like, you're not alone. Lots of people have gone through this and been through it, and are going through it. So it's really important that you recognize that, you know, there's always someone to talk to. And even if we don't know the answer, we will try our best to help as much as we can. And there's just some photos of some of our trips away. So we are hoping to meet up now in the next month or two, and then start hopefully going away again soon. So yeah, that's really all I can, I suppose, add. I don't know if there's much else to say, Fanula.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Evelyn. And the peer support that's available, that's invaluable for, you know, it's so important for the kids who've moved on, the young people to be able to offer that, and then for others to be able to avail of it. And Evelyn is absolute wealth of information. So for anybody who wasn't aware of canteen services, I hope that's given you a better idea of what's available there, and go and have a look at their website.
And can I just add in there, Evelyn herself is actually fantastic at supporting, away from peer-to-peer, she's fantastic at supporting teenagers and young adults on a one-to-one basis. I've spoken to a number of parents who have said the same thing. So thanks, Evelyn, for all of your dedication to our kids.
Okay, I think we are, I think I've taken up enough of everybody's time, and huge thank you to all of the panelists. Everybody's contribution was really valuable, and I hope that everybody got a lot out of it. I know I certainly did. So thank you very much to everybody for all your time. Thanks for all the comments and questions in the chat. I hope I've gotten to them all. If we've missed anything or anything comes up afterwards, please just drop us a line, and we'll get back to you that way. And I am going to stop the recording if I can find the button, which I can't. Sorry. There we go.